Thanks very much. So I'm Tanner. I'm from Kik, just down the 401 in Waterloo. Seen lots of people. Yeah, I know. I've seen a lot of people with Waterloo notebooks. A lot of people plugging Waterloo. I love it. Good ecosystem here. Yeah. So, is there a clicker? There we go. So KIN. It's a decentralized ecosystem of digital services for daily life. It's a pretty weighty statement, but really it came from two key kind of learnings. And one of those was that digital services are becoming more and more central to our daily life. A good example of this is I, for the first time, went traveling without a wallet, and I was able to do everything through my smartphone. But something that I actually think is a little bit even more powerful is that just recently we passed that 50% of the world is now connected through the internet. So not only 50% of the people in the world have access to information, but we're also connected to each other. But the second kind of key learning is that these digital services that we're accessing are increasingly being controlled by fewer and fewer players. So we're seeing this consolidation effect within the industry. And we said that that's actually problematic. And we learn, some of the basics of economics is that when you run into a monopoly, what it does is it creates an inefficient market. So it limits consumer choice. And what that means is that these centralized entities can basically offer their service for free, but any value that a user is creating, they're not getting to take part in that. The digital service is actually keeping that. And what this also does is problematic for innovation, because when you have this environment of monopolies, it creates this environment where all of the non-incumbents are trying to innovate in these silos, because you're trying to do one of two things. You're trying to avoid being copied and crushed, or you're trying to be the first to market with this perfect product and then get acquired. So what it actually is it's a misalignment of incentives, because the incentive then is to compete and not collaborate. And typically in economics, you would assume that competition is good for an efficient market. But in the world of digital services, where there's not a lot of marginal cost and you can actually give this service away for free, the deadweight loss of an inefficient market is on the innovation curve, because people aren't collaborating and it becomes inefficient to actually innovate. So the thought behind KIN is, how do we actually create the right incentives? How do you align incentives where you go from a competition model where it's two names, the name of the game is two things. One, it's capture as much market share as possible, and then two, extract as much value from that market share as possible. And that has misaligned incentives between all of the players, but also the end consumer. Now the opportunity is with a decentralized ecosystem where you can actually align incentives. And the reason for that is the decentralized ecosystem underpinned by a cryptocurrency is powerful, because now instead of trying to capture incremental pieces of the pie, there's an opportunity to actually grow the pie. Now with a fixed supply currency, like we heard a little bit about with crypto economics, at the rate at which demand obviously increases, the value of the underlying token increases. So by creating a tokenized business model, the incentive is actually not just to capture as much of the market share as possible or extract that value, it's to make that ecosystem worth as much as possible. And the way to do that is, again, by aligning incentives. So the way that we're thinking about doing that and are going to be implementing is through something called the KIN rewards engine. And the way the KIN rewards engine works is it's very analogous to the block reward, where with Bitcoin, you have this daily reward or reward that goes out for every block that rewards the miners for actually running the infrastructure level of the ecosystem. Now, what if you translate that to the application level? Because what this has done with Bitcoin is it's turned it into an arms race of computing power to capture that block reward. And it's relatively inefficient use of energy. In fact, just recently there's a study published that about 2.5 million homes in the US could be powered by the amount of electricity that gets allocated to mining Bitcoin. So what if we can actually turn this arms race from computing power and energy consumption to creating valuable experiences for consumers? So the rewards engine takes this idea of a daily payout, and it pays it out proportionally to the digital services within the ecosystem that are creating the most transaction volume. So it actually incentivizes facilitation of transactions as opposed to trying to take a piece of each transaction. Now this kind of creates a fundamental shift in thinking from traditional business models where you as the digital service have to always be the provider of that value and then actually just try and take a piece of that, whether you're connecting through advertising or taking a point off purchase. Now what it is that there's an actual reward for facilitating these transactions. And really the power of this is that there's an incentive to create an environment where consumers can create value for each other. Now we're moving where more and more people are being connected through the internet or through these digital services. And if you can create an ecosystem where the incentive is to create an environment where everyone can both create value but also capture that value that they're creating, we think that's a pretty powerful thing. We're pretty excited to be moving forward with that. Thank you.
All right. Questions, anyone?
Can you talk about the unique needs of users like high school students who may not be allowed to use other services like Facebook and who may not even have data plans, but they do have a complex economy or complex ecosystem, and they're often in close proximity to each other, so a decentralized network would help them. Is that something you're
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think to that end, we see that, you know, the user segment that you're talking about is very much connected and actually probably over-indexes the most in terms of the use of digital services. And I think that's what's actually really unique here is that it creates an environment where people that, you know, maybe don't have a full-time job, but are creating a lot of value in these networks. You know, for example, I'm a teenager and I provide a lot of great advice on this service. Today, there's not really a way for me to be compensated for that, but in an ecosystem where, you know, I could be compensated in kin and the digital service is incentivized to create this environment that actually facilitates that, these peer-to-peer or consumer-to-consumer interactions where I'm actually providing value to another consumer or even just being a great participant in this community. I think that's a really powerful thing and is an opportunity, again, for this type of user segment that spends a lot of time on their smartphone and in these digital services to actually start capturing some of the value they're creating.
Yeah.
Could you talk about some of the real world use cases of the digital services that are on your platform?
Yeah, for sure. So, so I am from Kik, and Kik is the first digital service to use kin. The kin rewards engine is going to be something that will be used to incentivize digital services outside of Kik as well. But in terms of some of the use cases within Kik, I think something that we have actually a lot of experience in this. We ran a centralized economy within Kik called Kik Points, where basically users could earn by performing certain actions and then turn around and spend on digital assets. And some of the things that we experimented with on the earn side, it started with basic things like watch an ad and then you could earn Kik points. But then we started to move to more consumer-to-consumer applications where it was, you know, provide advice within this community and then receive Kik points for that. Or complete this survey and then you can actually receive Kik points. So those are some of the things that we experimented early on and we saw a lot of success. So we'll be able to take some of those learnings and apply that moving forward. But I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities as well through the bot platform, for example, or a lot of these community-driven type of initiatives to actually have these consumer-to-consumer interactions.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
So why did Kik issue CAN instead of using another token or cryptocurrency that was already out there?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, right? And if it was just about providing a medium of exchange for users, it would have been a lot easier, like you said, to either implement another cryptocurrency or even just a Stripe integration, for example, right? And use traditional fiat currency. The reason that we issued CAN really was to set and architect an ecosystem that had the right incentive mechanisms. And the rewards engine really is that. By selling, so we sold 10% of CAN, and then 60% is allocated to the rewards engine. That 10% that was sold initially seeds the value of this, so it qualifies that the payout from the rewards engine is actually valuable. But the rewards engine is that powerful, aptly named engine that really drives this ecosystem and is able to align incentives across the right stakeholders.
One quick follow-up. Where's the other
Yes.
30%?
30% was retained by Kik. Yes.
All right, I think there's some questions there.
So for like a centralized company like Kik, who has like, I guess the currency is primarily used within Kik services, what is the advantage of like CAN over just like a centralized system? Let's say like, I don't know, like a table on your platform for storing currency.
Yeah, so I think it actually just links right back to kind of what I was talking about with Alex as well, is that we recognize that centralized entities on their own that exist outside of the monopoly have a difficult time actually creating sustainable value, because right now the way that the ecosystem is kind of run is that you offer the service for free and then you monetize off advertising. So the only people that can create sustainable business models are those that have enough scale to effectively monetize through advertising, but that's also problematic because you're taxing the user on that experience. By moving to a decentralized ecosystem, it actually creates an incentive to provide value sometimes outside of your actual centralized entity. So for example, Kik, like you said, is a centralized business using a decentralized currency. That now economically aligns us with all of the others and vice versa to actually provide value. And really what it is, for example, if a user of Kik is also a user of a great live streaming application, now we're incentivized to try and create great experiences where they might earn in the live streaming app and then come spend in Kik, or vice versa, for example.
All right, last question.
Hey, you were on the Rotman FinHub panel, I
Yes.
think, last week. And the context of the panel was, what's the role of academia within such a transformative technology such as blockchain? And there were some really, really interesting takeaways from that. So I was just hoping you could give a little bit of a summary to the wider audience of what are some of the key roles that academia can play in something like Kik or in this kind of transformation that we're going through.
Awesome. Thanks for the plug, by the way. So I think, so last week, just for context, I spoke at Rotman about some of the role that academia plays in fintech and just innovation in general. I think some of the key takeaways here really, and I can speak personally about some of the experiences we've had, is that there's a really interesting opportunity for academia and industry to actually collaborate on some of these areas. For example, the rewards engine. This has been a collaborative effort of us with a few other institutions, both in Canada and abroad, about what is that right algorithm, for example. And this is a really interesting opportunity for us to learn from people who spend a lot of time thinking about econometrics and some of the other areas that we need to consider when you're designing the right mechanism to incentivize. So that's kind of one example. I think it's really beneficial for academia as well to be able to test some of these hypotheses directly in market. So there's this great relationship between academia and industry where we can go and we can work with some of the brightest minds who are studying theoretical problems, and then we can actually put those in market, test, iterate, and actually take those learnings back to the classroom. And then vice versa, from the academic perspective, there's an opportunity to take things from the whiteboard, put it in market, and then actually learn and iterate. And I think that there's just a really interesting opportunity, and I can wholeheartedly say that we would not be where we are today without the collaboration of a lot of academia and institutions that have been really helpful both with this, but also in the product development process that Kik has been going through for about 10 years and some of the other things. We've had co-op students that have architected and launched product that now gets used by millions of users. And we've also had ongoing collaboration with whether it's PhD or master's students who are testing hypotheses. We put it in market and then are able to then translate that back and have this kind of collaborative process with Classroom. So.